Welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris, and I'm just doing a quick intro for my interview with Dr. Greg Rasmussen. It's a fascinating interview. I highly recommend you listen to this thing all the way through. I was captivated for well over an hour just listening to Greg, or Dr. Rasmussen, talk about his work with the African painted dogs. I am doing an intro because he just as soon as we got connected, he's in Zimbabwe, out in the field. He just started talking, and I just pressed record. I was like, I don't have time to do all this intro stuff. So just doing a quick intro for him. Fascinating interview, real treat. I'm calling him the Jane Goodall of African painted dogs. It just, tickled me pink to be able to speak to him. And hopefully one day I can get out there in Zimbabwe and shake this person's hand, because people like Greg and, of course, Jane Goodall and some of the leaders out there in the world doing the work in the field have dedicated their lives to do this work. And Greg's been out there studying these animals and is the reason that they're surviving and starting to thrive once again. It's a story we're going to keep telling about the African painted dog. I think it's an important one. Greg's got some work coming up in a few weeks that we're going to highlight, in some of our other podcast episodes. Towards the end of this interview, he talks about his next project, and that's really roadkill is a big problem with painted dogs, and he needs some help, financial help, to run this experiment on trying to slow people down on these roads through the Zambezi River Delta there in Zimbabwe, and then obviously Mozambique. So enjoy the interview. A fascinating look at his work with the African painted dogs. Be sure to, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Let us know what you think of this interview and share it with a friend. I mean, this is one of the top conservation experts in the world. So enjoy. And then as soon as you give us a thumbs up, we'll go live with it.
Yeah. I mean, we bummed out last time. This of course, is manic field season. I'm happily, I'm not saying, oh my God, I've got to do field work. Oh no,
You poor guy.
My poor me. I mean, I love field work. It's my whole raison d'etre, is to do serious field work, but it's just crazy. I mean, I came back last week after 10 days in the field. And I know, poor me, I had to sleep under the stars every night for 10 days. I know, really, but someone's got to do it, And I came back and I just said to myself, I'd love to go out for another 10 days, but I've got to spend like 3 or 4 days sending my team out as well, because they're always with me, and clearing decks. And so you're one of the deck clearers,
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. We appreciate it. And I'm going to leave that in, by the way, and I'm just going to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So for the listeners, I'm joined with Dr. Greg Rasmussen. This is an interview we've been chasing down for quite a while. He is actually out in the field in Zimbabwe doing African painted dog research. So welcome, Dr. Rasmussen.
I'm great to meet you, finally.
Yes, I know. It's just so amazing to be able to talk to you while you're taking a break from your field research, which we just heard. And, we're going to spend the next hour talking about these incredible animals, like just blown away by them.
I think incredible is the wrong word, actually, because kind of amazing. And that's why I'm still working with them, 32 years later. When I first, I'm talking 1987, whatever that is, you do the math. I saw my first painted dog, and I'm like, okay. And I came from a background of working with reptiles, so it was like, and someone had asked me like, well, Greg, I need someone to help work with painted dog, or wild dog as they were called in those days, which is another whole kind of dimension. And I was like, you got the wrong person. I work with reptiles, kind of this kind of stubborn kind of, I work with reptiles and I'm not going to be deviated. And that's actually a good trait, in conservation work. You don't deviate. And And I said, and he said, no, but you're a biologist and you come recommended. You work with the museum and you've got fieldwork experience and you're, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. I said, but I don't work with painted dogs. I work with reptiles. He said, but you're a biologist. You can work with anything. And this was a hell of a nice guy called Dr. Josh Ginsberg. And he set up a project all those years ago. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll help you for 6 months. I said, because I've got another reptile project coming up in 6 months and, but, it's nice to do something else. And, I got into the field because, basically I am a cut and dyed, I'm a hands-on, get your boots dirty field biologist, and that to me is actually, no offense to anybody else, is what makes the difference between good conservation and kind of mediocre, is when you really get in there and you get to know the problem. And I said to this guy, I said, I'll help you for 6 months. And in 1987, early 1988, I saw my first painted dog. And I'm like, okay, you're not a reptile, but you're interesting. As a biologist, you're interesting. And then I remember one of my very first experiences with painted dogs, and it's like, because I swear these dogs, they were kind of like, you're our candidate, we're gonna choose you to be our champion, and I had no choice in the matter, because very early on in the game, because being a field biologist to me is being in the field, not sitting in an office watching a computer. I have to do that sometimes and I resent it, but I know it's important. And I used to spend about 28 days a month working with dogs, packs of dogs. And then I spent 2 or 3 months cleaning up, 2 or 3 days cleaning up, and used to take me half a day just to get my body clean, because I was covered in God knows what, And I was following this pack of dogs, doing one of my kind of 28-day follows. And in those days, in science, we have something we call I'll share with the viewers, like a latitudinal study, where you take one pack and you study it intensively. If it farts, you record it. No, excuse the French, but
No.
I think that's acceptable. Anyway, you can edit it out if you like, but and anyway, and the that's a latitudinal study, and then you look to see later on in the study, and so that means that in that first, what I call kind of honeymoon period with the species, you get very intimate. And I was following this pack of dogs. They were called the Shamwari pack, which was a local name for the friendly ones. And because they became friends to me, and I called them the Shamwaris. And the Shamwari pack, suddenly following them every day for 28 days, I hear this huge interaction in the bush. One had a radio collar, and I hear that clearly a lion and dogs are having a punch-up. And I get in there, and I'm kind of a bit protective, like, oh my God, the dogs are dead. And sure enough, I get in there, and and there's a dog lying on the ground. His name was Olna, because the old dogs have names, and Olna had clearly been badly mauled by this lion. And I'm like, oh God, man, oh, he's gonna die. Oh no. And anyway, and he's endangered species, and already they'd kind of got under my skin, and so I managed to get a vet to the scene, which is like an obscene luck, because I was in the middle of nowhere, but I worked right. And I get a vet to the scene, and it's just, okay, we've got to remember this is like 30 something years ago, and he looked at the dog and he just said, "Why did you bother calling me? This dog is a lost cause." And I'm like, oh no, but you're a vet, you're going to do something. And he said, "It's nature." And I'm like, no, he's gonna die. and what was kind of interesting was that there was the kind of ethical questions were going down in my head. Well, what is nature anymore? Because we're all aware that we have clearly messed up our planet, and nature isn't quite the same, and we changed the game between lions and species and everything. Anyway, and then I'm got the other moral dilemma. I'm like, this is an endangered species, Shouldn't we be helping an endangered species that we ourselves have been responsible for making go extinct because we shot so many, like the wolf, So shouldn't we have some kind of moral obligation? Like, I wiped you out, and we're going to help you a little bit to help you get back, Anyway, so I didn't agree with the vet, but the vet had made his decision, and I'd kind of called the guy, and I came back the next morning, looked at the site and hoped that there was a dog alive or something, and clearly there was no dog, and there were just drag marks of a dog, and I assumed that hyenas had come in the night. So I continued to follow what was a pack of 11, now was a pack of 10, and I started to notice strange movements from one of the dogs. And the dog's name was Circus. He's a special dog in my heart. And Circus would disappear. And I'm like, where are you going, guy? And then one day, but Circus didn't have a collar. But one day we followed him, and on foot. And we found out that Circus was going to visit his brother, who wasn't dead. And they dragged him away into a thicket of bushes. And Circus every day was going back to his brother, cleaning his wounds up, and feeding him.
Wow.
Now this went on for 3 months, and 3 months later, Olna finally stood up and walked away and joined the pack again. And I'm like, my God, wow. Okay, dogs, that's it. I'm your advocate. You've got me.
Yes.
Just tell me what to do. I'll do my best.
Okay, I think the interview's over. That's just incredible.
Yeah, and it just kind of blew me away. And then the more I started to work with the dogs, I'm like, holy crap, as they say in the States,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and then I started to see, how they function as a species. And, and okay, not to be kind of philanthropic about this, but we as humans could learn a hell of a lot from painted dogs.
I think so. Yeah, I agree.
They're the only species. Then I started to see, hold on a minute, they never fight. There's no species alive that isn't arguing and squabbling and fighting. No, they don't. They've got this leadership thing. It's just off to a T. It's perfect. And basically the alphas, as we call them, we don't call them the dominants, because they're not. I'm gonna beat up on you, Chris. If you don't do as you're told, I'm gonna thump you, or vice versa, depending,
Yes.
It's like, no, when they're young, they're watching the emerging alpha, who is the smartest, the brightest, what we would call a true leader, which, as we all know in this world today, there are very few.
Very,
very, very few. My God, if we could have true leaders in this world, we'd be much better off. And not posturers. And I started to look at this as a species, and then you look at their kind of the etiquette and how every dog, not only, it's like the Three Musketeers in Amazing, one for all and all for one, and they, like, every day they greet each other. And that greeting is like, not just, I don't get up and go, hi all, it's like, hello, hello Chris, hello Fred, hello Martha, hello Elsie, because I'm reinforcing those bonds. And when we think about it as humans, if we were to, like, good morning, Chris, how are you? I care about you, When I screw up later in the day, which I'm guaranteed to do, because I'm just a human being, you might say, well, it's all right, Greg. You're forgiven. And the dogs just blew me away. And yet, of course, when I started, they were a species that was persecuted badly, like the wolf in the States. When I started in Zimbabwe, if we were lucky, there was 250 dogs in the whole country. They were slaughtered by ranchers as putative cattle killers. And all those, the same way. And of course, as a scientist, and I don't think people often understand, what scientists get up to. And in the same way, I don't understand when a mechanic explains to me about my car. He might just well be talking Japanese or something, and I'm not Japanese, and it's like straight over my head. But as a scientist, a good conservation biologist, the name of the game is to collect the right data to understand the problem and then solve it. Using those data, and that to me is very close to my heart. We've got a similar thing going on at the moment, which I'll probably get a chance to share with you. But in those days, it was the ranchers. Dogs are killing my cows.
Right.
Well, that's fine. I can accept what you say, that the dogs are killing your cows, and I'm going to solve the problem. Or I can find out, are dogs killing your cows?
Right.
How many cows are being killed by the dogs? What is the level of damage? How is that relevant to everything else? Well, so, and I embarked on a study in the farmlands where the dogs were, and they'd moved in, and the ranch said, "We're going to kill them." I'm like, not if I can help it. And they were like, no. They were like, they're killing our cows. Well, they're going to. And I'm saying, okay, well, they're not killing your cows. Anyway, it turned out that I said, look, let's make a deal here. I said, let me study them for 3 years and let me get the data. Oh, they're going to kill our cows. I said, if it turns out that the data shows that they are, slaughtering your cows and causing you huge, we'll go back to the drawing board. But in the meantime, let's have a 3-year moratorium. And then after that, I promise I'll move the whole pack. The fact is, in those days, I hadn't got a clue how to move a whole pack. But,
Just make promises.
I figured I got 3 years to work it out. Right. I figured it wasn't impossible. You just got to be pretty creative. And 3 years later, with helicopters and nets and practicing on dogs in Wangi National Park that were kind of easier targets than dogs in the farmland, we did actually succeed. But and it turned out that the dogs were responsible for 1.7% of the farmers' losses.
It's nothing.
Of their losses, not of their herd, of their losses. And I'm like, okay, and I'm like, so guys, so where was the problem? These dogs are not, but we hate them. I said, why didn't you say that in the first place? We're dealing with a completely different issue. We're not dealing with what you're losing. We're dealing with prejudice. Until we understand that, we can't solve the problem. And it turned out we did solve the problem. We moved the dogs, and the ranchers kind of realized that I wasn't going to go away, maybe. Sort of thing. And eventually I worked out how to move the dogs, but it was, and that's where kind of data. And it also gave me a figure that if compensation was ever going to be an issue, we had a figure. 1.7% of your losses. That's it. That's what we were going to pay if it came to. And that's where, where data were so important. And those dogs, I mean, they and particularly
absolutely.
The dogs in the farmland were, my God, these were the, you hear of Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner, that program, the cartoon. Well, I am a Wile E. Coyote because those dogs always, basically made a Mickey of me, As soon as I thought I was on top of the game, they'd be like, beep, beep, gone,
God.
If I could just ask real quick, you said they were down to 250. What's their estimated population today in Zimbabwe?
Somewhere around 750, 800.
Geez, still so low. Oh, so low.
No, it's low, but it's and it takes time, and and we've had some knocks. I mean, the African population is probably no more than 4,000.
That's true. I remember that. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, where we really have data to say, within reasonable estimates, this is the number. And the thing in Zimbabwe, though, is here's the rub. Many years of work and research. When I started, if painted dogs left Wangi National Park, the second their tracks were sighted, the ranchers were on their case. And then within 2 weeks, they were dead.
Yep.
That was, I mean, the analogy is like recently, when the ban was lifted on hunting wolves in Yellowstone, how many wolves were slaughtered very quickly? It's a lot.
Yeah.
And well, now in Zimbabwe, and though I say it myself, it's the only country where absolutely there are no dogs shot. There is no direct persecution. They've got other problems, which I'll share with you, that we're dealing with at the moment. And we're dealing with it in exactly the same way as I dealt with the ranchers, bit by bit. Let's get the data. Let's solve them. Let's understand the problem. Let's deal with it. But, deal with it based on fact. But, I mean, I started as I said, in 1987 and started to become effective in the farmlands 88, 89. And in 2000, and okay, you might say 12 years later, that's a long time, the last painted dog in Zimbabwe was shot. Now, it took 12, 13 years, but we did it.
Right.
And it...
Yeah, it's awesome. That's amazing. That's amazing.
And it's the only country it's ever happened, and probably for one of the few species it's ever happened, We nailed it for a whole country that no dogs were shot. And it was a combination of proving to the ranchers that they're not costing you financial loss. And people are not going to support you if you say, they're killing all my cows, because everyone knows the facts now. And they know it's fact.
Mm-hmm.
They know that you're just kind of like an insurance claim. My computer was worth $10,000. Meanwhile it was $250 from some Acme hardware store.
Yeah.
And they used to tell me that they're cows that were going to be worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and I'm like, as a calf, how do you know that calf's going to become a $10,000 prize bull? It's probably going to be dog meat.
I know. Yeah, or hamburger.
Yeah, exactly. No, well, they're horses if you're in England. But I'm just, there was a scenario some years ago when everyone thought they were eating hamburgers and they were horse meat. But anyway,
yeah.
I mean, but and things have changed, for the painted dog, and it's. In spite of the fact that I left my good old reptiles to become a champion for painted dogs, it's no surprises. It's a dance move I've never ever regretted. And like at the moment, we've and as you move on through the years, you solve one problem, conservation, and this is why it's dynamic. This is why in conservation you can't say, I've solved the problem, I can move on and go to sleep and retire, because you can't.
Nope.
Because the game is always changing. I remember when I solved the farmer issues, I thought, done it. I can relax. No. Some other ugly little bug comes up, and whether it's genetic diversity or whatever. And also, of course, the one thing about the dogs was in the early days was image.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into when I started working with the dogs, they were then called wild dog. That was their sort of common name. And then I started to, as a scientist, dig into, well, why are they called wild dogs? Where did that name come from, And it turns out, and this was really bizarre, it turns out that they were never originally called wild dogs at all. They were called painted hunting dog. They were called painted dog. They were called tricolored dog. They were called painted Lycaon, which is what they really probably should be called, but that's another story. And the name wild dog was deliberately given to them by ranchers, by people who hated them, to justify their slaughter.
Wow.
So we're talking like 120 years ago. People were aware that marketing.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like, if I were to look at a guy and say he's a paedophile, whether he was or whether he wasn't, in the best English language, he's screwed,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, do you think, how do I want to word this? Do you think public image of the painted dogs in the last 5-10 years has changed?
Oh yeah, horrendously, amazingly. Oh no, it's gone through the roof, and thank God for that. I mean, and the name wild dog was deliberately given by the ranchers to justify their slaughter, and all the bounty campaigns that were put on them were all, well, we can't say go and slaughter painted dogs, go slaughter wild dogs. Yeah, it sounds much better.
Right.
And really and truthfully, and in fact, in the early days, and this is no offense to Australians, because I actually like Australians.
I rub them all the time. I love them too. I was just there 2 weeks ago.
I love their frankness, and Aussies have got a kind of thing that I appreciate and I understand. And I used to be in Wangi National Park, and I'm talking, 1987, 1988, 1989. And on the side of my vehicle, I used to have Wangi Wild Dog Research, because that's what they were called. So that was on the side of my vehicle. And I get these Aussies coming out, and I love Aussies for the fact that they're good at pulling your tail, but I also love Aussies because when you pull the tail back, they don't complain, you see.
Oh, yeah, they give it right back to you.
You can give it to them and they can give it back to you, and it's fine,
Sure.
And I always think that's great in any kind of relationship, And they used to come, and they say genuinely, good day, mate. I see my bill. Oh, are you doing feral dog control? And I'd be like, no, I'm not conserving feral dogs. And of course, and then when I looked up, and I thought they were pulling my tail, but then I looked up that if you're an Australian, a wild dog is a feral dog to be shot on sight. And they thought that maybe in Wangi National Park there were, feral dogs, and I was part of the feral dog control team. with a hidden gun in there, going to shoot bloody painted dogs, And I'm like, this name's got to change, This has got to change. And that was the beginning of the birth of the name Painted Dog, which has stuck, and thank God it has, because it's made a huge difference. And in fact, some years later, I met a group of marketing experts. And the first thing they said, well, at least you're not calling it a wild dog, because if you did, you wouldn't, from a marketing perspective, it wasn't going to cut any ice. You weren't going to win, And I'm like, well, good. At least experts on the knowledge of marketing are leading me in the right direction and helping me understand that I'm barking up the right trees, literally.
Right. Well, I was just going to say real quick, I think it was Planet Earth. It was like a decade ago. And they had that incredible sequence of the dogs hunting. And I remember that so vividly, so amazing, that I think it made a huge impact on me and the many millions that watched that sequence.
What was hilarious about that, though, is that they still never ever, with all their helicopters and their they had these cameras on gimbals coming from the helicopters, they still never filmed the kill. They got close, but you're right. The one thing that blew me away, and always does blow me away, is that how these dogs organize. And to this day, we still have no idea about like the silent communication. We thought it might be ultrasound, but we're still not sure what's going on there. But they managed to communicate like a football team with a bunch of blindfolds on them, you know. Yeah, they can still play football with an impala, you know. I mean, it's like, and it's incredible, you know, that because their organization, and that's something that really started to blow me away. Because, you know, apart from, you know, the my dear friend Olna, who was looked after by circus, and I wondered whether that was a one-off thing. And were other packs going to exhibit that? And then I realized, as I studied later and learned more and more packs, I realized that what dogs are so good at is coordination and organization and what we call in science, but it makes sense, is division of labor. You know, if you, Chris, are a good organizer on my team, you will be given the organizational job, you know. If I, Greg, am good at the hunter, I will get the hunting job, you know. If another dog, and I always remember one particular dog who stood out, not because of his, like, excellence, but I called him Magellan. And dear old Magellan was, you know, in a pack, you can imagine we have alphas, betas, and gammas. And alphas obviously are the leaders, the ones born to be leaders. The betas are like main support team, and betas, if an alpha gets badly injured, they'll, you know, kick in and take over for a while and then say, here we are, you know, brother. I had a case once where an alpha was so badly snared he couldn't even move, and he was, and the beta just took over the role of running the pack, hunting. And as soon as the alpha was better, and he was better because basically I darted him, got the snare off, and he became better. And the beta said, oh, here we are, brother, you know, be alpha again. We need you, you know, as alpha. You know, where in society would that happen, you know? Oh, I'm a deposed.
I know, no kidding.
You know, no kidding. Oh, good, you're down, Greg. Yay! Oh, good. I'm gonna take over, and I'm not handing back the shoe. You know, and so that's when I started to realize, you know. But anyway, we had our dear friend Magellan, and Magellan wasn't an alpha, and he wasn't a beta. He was a gamma, and the gammas are kind of, I haven't got a clue what to do, but if you tell me what to do, I'm going to do it to my best of my ability. And they're great support, you know, for a pack. You know, they're kind of, and when we think about that in any human society, we also need those individuals. And the nice thing about it in painted dog society is that the gamma isn't treated in any like derogatory way. It's not like, oh, you're the run to the listen. He is like, you're a part of the team, and you get exactly the same treatment as everybody else. You know, we share the food with you equitably. So this particular dog, Magellan, and I called him Magellan. And you might think, well, of course, if you think about Magellan, you think about the great explorer and everything else. And well, I called him Magellan because with my own twisted humor, Magellan Corporation in those days used to make GPS units, and they had donated us 2 GPS units, and they didn't work. And Magellan was always lost on every single hunt, always. He never got a clue where he was, and the pack would be waiting. They'd eaten something. And Magellan, they'd all be waiting, oh, where's Magellan? Where's Magellan? You know, you could write a blooming song about him, you know. And Magellan would arrive, found you! And then they'd be like, oh,
oh my goodness.
Oh, here we go again, it's Magellan. And Magellan, and I used to kind of look at the dogs and think, why do you put up with Magellan? You know? You know, in theory, he has no value to the collective advantage of the pack. But I was naive in those days, you know. And then when I started to analyze the data and look at the role of every individual that could physically carry 20 pounds or 10 kilos of meat back to the den, he had a value. You know, because, you know, to bring back another, you know, you kill a kudu that weighs 200 pounds, a Magellan will happily help by filling his stomach, and he'll go back to the den and regurgitate. And then, you know, the pack, when they've got the den, you know, painted dogs always try and hope to leave babysitters. And a babysitter, well, there's babysitting and babysitting, you know, and the pack identifies every time they go out by doing like a 360 degrees kind of circuit of the den. They identify whether it's safe to go or how safe it is to go. You know, what's the threat? And most of the time it's like a fire risk, you know, it's green. There's no lions around, there's no hyenas around. So what do? You don't need to leave a high-ranking individual. And what do you leave? Who do you leave behind? Magellan. You know?
Magellan.
Because you can't get, you know, be like, you can't get lost, you know. But if the threat level was high, like I remember one time I was close to what we call they have a den, and then they have what we call caching, from cache to, you know, the French to hide. And then after 12 weeks, they leave the den, which is the hole in the ground, and then every day they move the pups to a hiding place. And they were at a cache site, and like geocaching, really, isn't it? And they were at a cache site, but only for their pups, and no kind of Garmin secret society spot, you know. And I heard myself a lion. I'm like, oh, this is dangerous. And I'm like, what are the pack going to do now? Because Magellan was there, and it was like complete role reversal. Magellan joined the pack hunting, and the alpha male was now, well, I'm staying behind because this is serious. It takes, you know, this is like a red fire risk. And if anything goes wrong, I'm going to deal with it. We can't leave Magellan.
No.
And it's just so organized. You know, it was just like, if there was any dog in the pack that should have stayed behind, it was the alpha male. And who does stay behind? The alpha male.
The level of intelligence just blows me away.
Yeah, and it blows me away as well. Yeah. In fact, you know, the number of times when I've been, you know, working with the dogs, and particularly when I've been trying to plan different captures, you know, in theory for their own well-being, you know, in the farmland, you know, where I wish I was Dr. Dolittle, I could say, guys, let's have a chat, you know. Just jump in the back of my truck, you know, and I'll scoot you away without any anesthesia, and of course it never happens, you know. And they're ducking and diving and avoiding me, you know.
Rick, can I just ask, you know, your research there in Zimbabwe, is it reaching across borders, you know, down in South Africa? I just read a story yesterday about a pack that killed 3 cows in Kenya. So are you able to push that throughout Africa?
Well, we are. I mean, you know, interestingly and factually, I mean, a lot of, you know, like my early research, you know, was, you know, I mean, one of the first things in my early research on the farmland was like, I came up with this simple observation that when the dogs were navigating the farmlands, you know, you can imagine they've got farmlands, you've got fence lines. And then I'd know because we were foot tracking those dogs all the time, and we didn't have a collar on. They were too smart for that. And in fact, one of my trackers, I was kind of hiring and firing trackers because I was like, oh, you're clearly no good as a tracker because we can't find the dogs, you know. And one of the trackers, you know, finally brought me to kind of I don't know, a state of, yeah, you're right, my friend, you know. And one evening, we'd been tracking these dogs for 2 weeks, and I was so impressed with this guy because he was fast, and he was like, you know, it was like, to him, it was like, they're there, let's go. And we were walking our backsides off, which was brilliant. And then one evening, he slumped down and he sat by the fire as we ate our evening food, you know. And he just said, we've got a problem. And I'm like, yeah, and sometimes, you know, I can be a bit harsh, and I'm like, what do you mean we've got a problem, you know? We can solve problems, you know. And I'm thinking maybe he's going to say there's not enough food, or I don't know what I was thinking. Probably wasn't very rational, you know. And he said, these dogs, he said, they're as clever as a leopard. And I'm like, so? And he said, there's 14 of them, and they're working as a team. We have a problem. And I'm like, you're right. We've got a problem. You know? We've got a big problem, you know. And in fact, that was another of my, what I call my famous historical dogs that if I'm ever have the time or the wherewithal to write a book or a shadow writer, you know, that dog was named Bigfoot. And he was named Bigfoot for a good reason, because all we ever saw for 3 years was his footprint. We never ever saw the individual. He was like this, like Bigfoot, you know. And he had big and he had big feet as well. Just to kind of, you know, add to it, he had the biggest feet of any painted dog I'd ever seen. And I still, to this day, I don't think we'll ever match his feet with any other dog that I work with. And you know, and Bigfoot was, again, you know, I wrote a scientific paper, and I didn't specifically say, oh, I was studying Bigfoot, because you don't write that in science, but the paper was about his pack and how they changed their whole behavior and went nocturnal because they knew that they were in farmland. And they balanced their time so carefully that it meant that they minimized their potential interaction with humans. And they hunted the second the moon even gave a glimmer of light, they'd be out there going, we're hunting. We can't see very well, but it's better than getting shot.
Right.
And it was just,
again, the intelligence.
Yeah, it was organized. It was the organization. It wasn't, you know, it was an organization that was, you know, it wasn't like, oh, this is part of evolutionary history. This is like worked out. No, this is like, you know, humans are around from, you know, from sunrise until sunset. And if we can avoid the sunrise hours by utilizing the moonlight hours, we're not as successful hunting, but we don't get shot. And it was those sort of things that it was like, dogs, you've got me for life. You know, you're just too. And then even when I, you know, started later on to look at the hunting data and how they, you know, I know, because obviously painted dogs are known for having this extreme, during what we call a hunt period. The hunt period is from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep. So like in the dog's case, it might be from 5 in the morning to 9 in the morning. That's a hunt period. And how incredibly successful they are. Or also when they start a chase, a proper chase, how successful they are. And part of it is because they're so organized as a team. And part of it is because they make exceptionally good decisions. You know, they won't just, you know, take like a wild card, but let's chase that impala that's, you know, 500 yards away. Well, you know, do your maths, mate. You know, the energy expended running 500 meters is going to cost you badly.
Right.
And then, you know, the hyenas and the impala's got a 500 meter head start. And when you analyze the data, it's like the decisions they're making are like spot on. And they choose the size of prey animal. You know, like if there's 10 of us, we'll go for a prey animal that size. Because we can't eat any more than that. Even though two animals, I know here's an urban myth, you see. People think, well, if there's 10 dogs, they can kill bigger animals. 2 dogs can kill the biggest animal they will knock down, which is a kudu bull. In 60 seconds, less than 60 seconds, it's down. And so it's nothing to do with, it's just, and okay, well, painted dogs have got a little trick up their sleeve that, you know, as humans, we always think that we've got tricks up our sleeves that no one else knows, you know. And
yeah, I know.
You know, and yet we realize if we're actually smart enough, we'll say, well, actually, nature's been doing that for 10,000 years.
Right.
And you know, human beings, when they're controlling horses or bulls, they have what they think is a trick that they use called the twitch, where they hold it by the nose. And you know, that's why bulls often have a, you know, ring in their nose, and it turns out that painted dogs have been using that probably for, you know, few million years. And when they want to immobilize a really big animal, they bite it on the nose. And you might say, well, what does that do? And interestingly, and this again is where I do love science and research, because it helps us to understand what's going on. And there was a Dutch vet who was studying what humans call the twitch hold on horses and bulls, and he did all the, you know, obviously, because they were trying to see, was it a welfare issue, which is great, you know,
right.
that we throw science at it. Is it welfare? And it turns out that there's a nerve called the trigeminal nerve that the second you like hit the nose, the trigeminal nerve gets disturbed and the body releases endorphins, which are like a morphine derivative. And in fact, you know, you're a guy, you might remember, you know, as kids, do you ever remember when someone punches you on the nose, or you daftly run into a door and smack yourself on the nose? Oh, yeah. You almost feel like, you feel stunned, you know? Mm-hmm. You feel like, oh. And because what it is your cranial nerve is going, my God, there's an attack.
Yeah, my face,
and it's crazy, and it's far worse than if, you know, a kid smacks you somewhere else, but if it hits you right on the nose, it's damn sore, you know, and you're almost like, oh. And the dogs are doing this to their prey animals, you know, and it's like, but only large ones, you know, and that's how they immobilize a large kudu bull. And then this Dutch vet, you know, the scientific paper, the title was, is the twitch a pain response or clinical acupuncture? And his kind of result was that it was clinical acupuncture. And
that's really, I was looking at.
You know, and you know, you just look at these guys and you think, oh my God, it's just so damn organized, you know.
It is. So can you just tell me, what's it look like right now from your opinion? I mean, obviously one of the top world experts on painted dogs. What's their future look like 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road?
Many of the problems that existed, as I already said when I started, don't exist anymore. Like ranchers shooting the hell out of them, you know, certainly in Zimbabwe. The challenges are the modern world encroachment and habitat loss. And habitat loss is coming from many different directions, and human encroachment. I mean, in fact, I've got 2 major thrusts at the moment that are absolutely, one very directly and one indirectly, crippling painted dogs in Zimbabwe. And they're not insoluble, but they're going to take work, data, and like everything else, money, you know. And one of the kind of the more obvious problems is, like, we have a major highway, unrestricted highway through one of the national parks, a Zambezi National Park. going from Victoria Falls to Kazangula. It's a 70-kilometre section of road. And apart from other wildlife, it is absolutely slaughtering painted dogs. And it's annihilating the dogs, but never mind that. I mean, let's always remember that, dogs are my flagship, but my mission is conservation, so that all the other, of course, I care about the elephants that get killed, the giraffe that get killed, the cobras that get killed, the birds that get killed, the hyenas, the leopards, the cheetahs, the jackals, whatever that get smacked by cars and people doing speeding. And roadkill for many species is a huge issue. And this is why, every time if anyone listening to this, if there's anything you can ever do or join an appeal that says there's a road, a highway going through a national park, put your penny's worth in, make that 100,000 signatures or whatever, because, so that's one of our major problems at the moment. Now, okay, I can sit and we can cry in our soup, and I've just started to work in the area where, I can't be everywhere at the same time, but now last 4 or 5 years I've been in this area. I've realized the challenge for dogs just because of this one highway. And it's turned the situation around where packs don't live more than 18 months. Before, critical pack members wiped out, hit by a car, and then, of course, all the pups die because they're 18 months, they're not dependent, and the territory becomes vacant, and it just becomes filled with random dogs, and they try to form a new thing, and then the same fate befalls them. And okay, at the moment, for example, me and my team was students, and my core team we're collecting data on the traffic, and then working with ministry and police and officials and getting permission for road signs that are going to go up. And eventually, it's got to go to government to get gazetting for, even new speed limits and fines that are obscene, which will solve it, by the way. And our high-speed traffic is an insidious thing, because people don't realize how damaging it is.
Right.
And so, of course, human encroachment. The other problem we're having, which is we're just working on putting the data together. Well, we've got the data, and we're slowly is even more insidious, because it's coming from a quarter that we really wouldn't have expected, which is tourism.
Yep.
And you might think, well, great, people love painted dogs, and everyone wants to go seeing painted dogs. And when painted dogs have their dens, in southern Africa at least, tour operators are working their backsides off to find the dens and take their guests to see the dogs. Well, you might say, well, that's sort of innocuous, but analyzing the data, it is not, and it is ferociously bad. And basically, me and my team of students over the last 5-6 years have worked on those data using camera traps at disturbed and non-disturbed dens. And what happens is that the dogs at the dens where tourists visit on a regular basis, of course, they play hide. They then not so visible, obvious. They move den more often, and when they move den, they lose puppies, which is direct loss because of tourism. The pups don't get fed properly because painted dogs have to have at least 8 or 10 meals a day, and they're only getting 5. And they're losing growth periods, which then means that when they leave the den, finally, their leg lengths are 7% shorter than they should be.
Wow.
It also means that we've now taken years and years worth of painstaking data that shows that those dogs that were at disturbed dens as puppies end up with legs that are 6% shorter than their peers.
Wow.
Now, if your trade is a top athlete and you're in the 100-meter sprint, you're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those are the sort of issues. And then, we tie that with habitat loss. I mean, however, we can all sort of, look at the doom and gloom, which life can be a bit tough in the fire face of conservation. But, there are some lights. And in fact, there's those lights that keep me alive. And for example, in southern Africa here, right where I am, in the heart of Victoria Falls, and there was an initiative called KAZA, K-A-Z-A, Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Park Initiative, Transfrontier Initiative. And this is where 5 countries have got together and have started to look at the feasibility of, and not done more than that, have mapped out possible links and connections for wildlife over 5 countries. Now that's a bold initiative. And 10, 15 years ago, that was just a little seed of an idea that someone had. Well, now it's a reality. And so, in spite of, like roadkills and irresponsible tourism, which I think, can be sorted out, the future for dogs, I mean, when I started, as I say, 30 plus years ago, when the millisecond dogs left Wangi National Park, they were shot. And, there were posses out to kill them.
Yes. Yeah.
And they were done in 2 weeks. That was it. They were, those days are done. And whilst we have new challenges, and okay, global warming is a problem for dogs, by the way, and habitat loss, but we are waking up to the fact that habitat connectivity, and there are a team. Yes, I like to champion painted dogs. But within KAZA we have the KAZA Carnivore Coalition, where there are people championing hyenas and lions, and and together we're working together as a team.
Right.
And maybe we'll, be like my tracker said, they're working as a team and we're done,
Would you say, because, ecotourism, that's one thing we talk a lot about, and we're seeing negative impacts from that. So would you agree that it's going to take multiple strategies around the planet?
If I could have my selfish druthers for painted dogs, the first thing is that what I and this isn't just a plea for funding, but what people don't realize is how much money it costs to keep these animals alive.
Oh, yeah.
How much is going on in the background to keep the animal that you dream of seeing when you go on safari alive is enormous. I mean, this road traffic awareness campaign, I mean, we just got permission from Ministry of Roads. The road signs alone are going to cost $20,000. Every bit of signage. But still, the research itself has taken 12 months of data, which is putting a team out there. But also, then there is the responsible tourism movement. There is, it's like people thinking about, this egg that I've got, is it properly free range? And, let me be that responsible person that will eat an egg that I know that the chicken's been running around. I've got 40 chickens on 20 acres. They're free range.
Yes. Like they live, but yeah.
And they live by the sword and die by the sword because they, have to become organized and fight off the hawks and the this and the that, and they, and again I have to make the habitat right so that they can hide somewhere to hide when the hawks come to snitch one, But seriously, it is about I mean, tourism, responsible tourism, like any responsible activity, can be great. But, we have to almost have it has to be identified that, that tourism gets a green stamp of approval, but not from the tourism industry, but from the conservation industry.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, and I, painted dogs are in a 100 times better shape than they ever were when I started. And even though they've got a bunch of new problems, when I started 30 years ago plus, it was touch and go whether painted dogs became extinct in Zimbabwe. And the fact is that probability is a very low probability now. And years ago, it was like a 90-something% probability they were going. And, some safari guides, they say to me, and they say, if you hadn't come along, we would never see painted dogs because they'd have become extinct. Because those individuals also knew the pressures the dogs were under. And a lot of those pressures have been removed. And human perception and prejudice is the driving force of extinction. And in those days, perception and prejudice was ferocious. And that has been nailed. That is gone.
Well, so I've kept you about an hour, and I could listen to you for all day. But could you just kind of talk about the Painted Dog Trust?
Right, Painted Dog Research Trust. Okay, the whole mission is to, through research and education, solve survival issues for painted dogs. We're based near Victoria Falls. We're building a whole facility that at every level we're ecologically friendly, even down to my chickens and my dog. They all have a pretty good life. But bottom line is the whole idea is to use science to collect data that will help conserve painted dogs and associated species in their habitats. But also, one of the most important mantras is to build for the future of conservation. And to me, that means investing in young biologists or young wannabe biologists and training. So here I work on identifying, potential young Gregs or Gregesses that want to carry, the conservation baton into the next 50 years or whatever they can put their time in, and provide the tools. Because if we don't have an army, or at least a number of well-equipped, intellectually and to be a field biologist, you can be the smartest cookie in the world, but if you can't do field work, you ain't going to get down to the nuts and bolts of the problem. So so my mission here is to bit by bit identify predominantly homegrown Zimbabweans, but they can be homegrown Africans, they can be anyone in the world basically that really wants to become a conservation biologist. And there's a hell of a lot to learn. And it's not just about like being good with statistics and computers. It's about being able to fix damn cars, which are my bête noire. It's being able to understand the relationships and working with communities. It's about being that all-rounder. And so Painted Dog Research Trust, we've got accommodation here where we hold training courses for any bodies or organizations that are committed to conservation at a price they can afford. Provide a home for young biologists where, I'm almost selfishly solving for other students problems that I faced. When I started my field work, I could never find anywhere to stay that was close enough to a national park. So if a young student says, I've got this research project and I want to do it, at the very least I can provide you with a bed and a desk. That's actually clean, not some hovel that, and even though my standards are not high, that even I wouldn't live in, and so we're building this, the whole thing about Painted Dog Research Trust is to build an environment where young conservation biologists can thrive and ply their trade, where they're and training, young Zimbabweans, whether they're, and it doesn't have to be young, necessarily university graduates, in our local environment. If I spot a young school kid that's like, I don't want to live with conservation, shouldn't you lose you? You've got potential. Let's take you on board. Let's see if we can groom you, particularly young women that their families are going, well, she's a girl. I'm sorry, that's the situation we have to face. It's a reality. And, at the moment, I've got a young lady, Losrita, just to give you an example of the sort of, support we like to give. And, one of the teachers came and said, I've got this young lady, she's not going to be able to do her final years of school because she's going to get pulled away to go and help the family. And I'm like, he said, but she's a bright young girl and she wants to go forward in conservation, like sciences, and I said, well, let me see what I can do. And so, we spoke to her parents, her mother, and because father was non-existent, which is quite a common problem in Africa and in the world, I think. But anyway, and so, I said, we'll sponsor her to do her final years at school. And if she passes that, we'll sponsor her to go to university.
That's awesome.
And this young woman now, well, as I speak, she's out in the field collecting data in between her university sabbatical. Tonight she's sleeping out under the stars somewhere in the bush, and I'm dead proud of her.
Oh, that's amazing. I know we have a lot of young listeners that, around the world, not just in the United States, that we will definitely be pushing the Painted Dog Research Trust. And Deborah reached out to me after we did our Painted Dog episode, told us to reach out to you, but she travels there and works with you, volunteers her time. And
yeah, she's just been with us now. Yeah,
I think you're going to get a flurry of applications here pretty quick.
The whole thing is that one of my own little kind of mantras is that we will solve conservation issues. You asked about the doom and gloom, and we can't start looking at everything from a negative lens, because if we do, we've admitted defeat. But bottom line is that one of my things, and I really believe in it, is that we can solve conservation issues, and what we need is a critical mass of conservationists. Now, that critical mass may not be 50%, it may not be 90%, it may be 30%, it may be 20%, but it's enough people that care and are empowered to make a difference. And in fact, in conservation, anyone can make a difference. Picking up the damn plastic bag and stopping climate trouble happening. Right. Don't be a greedy businessman, and and just to hell with the planet. I know. And ultimately, the plight of the painted dog is as much a plight of the planet. And I think we all have to be aware of that. The mess we've created is a big holy mess. It
is, but I think it's changing. It
is changing. It was like I was fundraising in England at the time when they had these climate change protests, and the protesters, I met one of the protesters a couple of days later, who was a scientist, and she said, we had banners up, that said, We are not greenies. We are not radicals. We are scientists, and we are scared.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, said it all. That was, part of the situation. And that's where the critical mass comes in. The more the world wakes up to the fact that we have to look in the mirror and say, we have messed up.
Right. And it's time to act now.
And that's one of the things. And that's why, we do need our youth, and that's why, for me, to invest in young conservation biologists and empower them and get them, fast track them to get where they may get anyway without me, but it'll take them a hell of a lot longer.
Right. Well, I'm very optimistic about this next generation coming. I think they're very in tune. They're very green. It's just, what are we going to leave them?
They need someone to lead them. They need someone to, get them on the right track, help them. In the end, we get there. But, we can get there if the right mentor is there. One of my, I'm not just blowing my own drum. One of my students said, well, she's now doing her master's at Leeds and she got a full scholarship and she has 3 universities in England kind of, she's Zimbabwean, saying, but can we give you a scholarship? But we've got this, but we've got that. And she got there and she was one of my students, still is, basically. And she said, but if I'd had you since I left school, I'd have got there, 3 years faster.
Right.
Yeah, she was going to get there. Of course she was. She was a bright young woman and, motivated and everything else. But the more, we all need help. And a helping hand goes a long way.
It does. And Dr. Greg Rasmussen, you've captivated me for over an hour. I can't thank you enough. I know you're busy and you're doing so much for the painted dogs, and we're going to do what we can. I'm in all honesty, we've covered, I think, nearly 80 species now since we started this podcast. Painted dogs have surprised me the most. Maybe honey badger too, but painted dogs.
Honey badgers, they're pretty cool. Yeah, they're pretty amazing. Don't mess with me. I'm a honey badger. they're something else.
Oh my goodness, I crack up.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
Oh, but thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and our listeners. And we will definitely be pushing the Painted Dog Research Trust, and get ready for those applications to start coming in.
Yeah, and by return, we're going to start putting an appeal out for road sign money for these painted dogs on the highway, and I'll feed you the link when I get an opportunity.
Please. Yes, we definitely will be pushing that too. I'm personally going to make a donation the second I see that. So we'll definitely be pushing that with our listeners.
Lovely. All right. And it's a one-off focus cause. All right. Chris, pleasure. And listeners, been great to share time with you.
Thank you so much.